Hey, good afternoon. I am Stuart Harvey, Director of Projects in Tube Lines. I'll explain the organisational context in a few slides. And on my right, sitting in the chair, is Andy Bell, who is Project Director in Thales, working on the Jubilee Northern Line upgrade. This presentation really focuses on what we've learned from the Jubilee line. I just want to play a short clip. That's it? Okay. Right. So just in terms of the organisational context of where we fit together. So the operator of the Jubilee Northern Line is obviously London Underground. Tube lines are kind of two things to London Underground. We are a contractor of a form, but we're also wholly owned by TfL as well. So it's although there is a contractual relationship, we are one. We also have Thales UK, who's the contractor, the system designer, installer and tester, and they have Thales in Canada, MTML in India, and various array of installation subcontractors. So that's the organisation structure. So just to talk about the Jubilee line, the first section of the Jubilee line, which was about 3/4 of the line, went into service beginning of 2011. The final section came to service in around June 2011, and that was the last quarter, though it did have a major depot and the rest of the line. So one of the issues there is we did have a big bang. We did have a major section of the Jubilee line come into service with a complex depot and lots of complex interfaces, and there's some lessons to learn from that. Just as a note, we have had various timetable iterations, and yesterday we brought in our Olympic timetable, working timetable 12, which so far, fingers crossed, has been a good success, and the system is responding well to that. However, I'm not going to make out that the Jubilee line upgrade is a model project. There's a lot we can learn from it, thankfully, because we do have to deliver the Northern Line faster and more cost-effectively than we did, and more reliably. So I'm actually grateful. There's a lot we can learn. So looking at the Northern Line upgrade, it is made up of a rolling stock traction upgrade. There's aluminium conductor rail across about 17 kilometres. There's track reconditioning, track renewals. There's a new signalling and control system, and there's a new high gate control room. It's roughly 40% larger than the Jubilee line, and we have to deliver it more quickly and cheaper than we did in the smaller Jubilee line. And as David has already alluded to, we have to do it with far, far less access. So that's the challenge ahead. Just to make it even more difficult, and I changed this because David was here, the Northern Line is now one of the London Underground's best performing lines as it sits there today, albeit with lower capacity. It has extremely low, old signalling system, so it has very fragile wires and fragile kit, so we have to do our best to stay away from the existing signalling system as best we can. It has an extremely complex junction layout, and it's extremely congested for those of you who know if you use it. So the challenge is we have to deliver 20% additional capacity and reduce journey times by 18%. That's the promise that we've given to DfT. That's the promise that Thales have made to Tube Lines and therefore London Underground. All that while keeping the reliability of the Northern Line as it is today and building on it. So today Andy and I are going to focus on the signalling system. So we have a very short brief. We have to deliver on time and budget, and we're going to slightly develop that in a minute. We need to deliver with minimal closures. David alluded to, there were literally hundreds of closures on the Jubilee line, And even before the PPP coming back into house, the Northern Line was going to be delivered with something like 70 closures and a major set of early shutdowns. We've had to change all that. We have to also build on the Jubilee Line experience. We're not going to throw away the Jubilee Line system. It very much underpins what we're doing, but we've gone about trying to make sure that we take the very best of the Jubilee Line and do away with some of the bits that are not so good. And then we're locking the scope. So deviation from scope is not going to be allowed on the Jubilee Line unless it's absolutely necessary. And we'll talk a bit more about that. So important to the whole concept of how do we learn from the Jubilee Line and build a successful Northern Line delivery is around the concept of one team. And it's something that was put in place about 18 months ago. And was partly the reason why the Jubilee Line was finished, and it's certainly going to be the reason why the Northern Line is delivered towards the vision we have. The vision we have, and ultimately safety is king, so our vision that Andy and I share and our organisation shares, we will deliver this upgrade safely. We'll also intend to deliver it ahead of time and below budget, and we will keep the reliability of the railway intact. That is no mean feat, but it is using one team that will achieve it. Part of the one team means that everyone understands how their part fits in with that vision we've just given, and we have measurement capability and KPIs throughout each of the team areas to make sure that everyone understands how they play the part of the bigger picture, the bigger vision. Another key thing is ownership of each other's problems. You won't see Andy and I just protecting our own patch, trying to do the best thing for our own organisation. We have lots of vibrant conversations about the way we do the best thing for delivery overall. And that needs some compromises, it needs some working together. We also recognise within our teams what each person, which each group of teams brings to the party. So we make the best of each other's strengths and help each other with our weaknesses. That's key. We've also gone about breaking down silo-based organisations. So we don't let assurance or commercial rule the roost. Everyone has to play their part. There are no silos within the project team. We've also instigated joint risk reviews, so we don't just look at one organisation's risk register, we look at our risk register together. This is a new concept we're working. We help each other to try and mitigate each other's risks, because at the end of the day, delivering this project cheaply or lowest possible cost will almost certainly mean we deliver it on time or early. We also have to take a fair and balanced approach to the use of the contract. That doesn't mean we don't use the contract. It means that we haven't got our teams looking at every bit of the contract every minute of the day. I haven't actually got the new contract out my drawer since it was signed. That's a bit of a cliche, but I honestly haven't, because I know what it says broadly, and I don't need to engage in conversations with Andy about exactly what it says, because we're taking a fair and balanced view. So just looking at one team in context, you can have all the governance in the world, you can have all the process in the world, you can have great collaboration, but if your behaviours are not right, none of that matters. So key to delivering a successful signalling project on time and to budget is behaviours. And Andy's going to talk a bit more about that.
Thank you. Okay, I want to just give you some examples of behaviours and some of the good behaviours that we've started to develop. I don't pretend that we're all the way through that journey, but over the last 18 months working together on Northern Line, our organisations have started to develop those behaviours. And I think the first thing that I would say is that behaviours are key at a number of levels. In a way, having the leadership and having leaders in the organisations, displaying the right behaviours, working collaboratively, sharing each other's problems, is obviously essential and is obviously fundamental to how the project moves forward. But equally, and one of the challenges, is how do you drive that culture into the wider organisation? How do your engineers, how do your software team, how do your installers and your testers, what does being part of one team, what does working together mean for them? But it is absolutely key that feeling, that culture permeates through the organisation, because then we start to see real benefits, real gains, real working together on site to solve problems, to remain on programme, to recover issues. And it's at that working level that we really see the benefits. But that is obviously dictated by the way that the leaders and the senior people within each organisation work together. So I think one of the key principles, and it probably isn't a huge surprise, but is the importance of openness and honesty in our communications. If we're going to work together, then there must be an ability to trust and to understand each other, to work through problems, and to develop a relationship and an appreciation of what the drivers are for both organisations and how we address problems together. One of the initiatives, I think we got it down there as a change board, one of the initiatives that we've implemented on the Northern Line upgrade is to have a change board, actually a panel of senior members from each organisation who sit down on a periodic basis and look at how we drive the culture. You know, things don't change if we don't put in place plans, if we don't have actions, if we don't make a conscious effort to change them. So coming from an old organisation, an old setup that was very contractually driven, that was very aggressive in its approach, it's been really important to us to be able to sit down together and to look at what we need to change, what behaviours need to be challenged, to have open conversations about where we need to drive different ways of working and better collaboration. And I think keeping in mind all the time the joint vision. As Stuart said, our objective, our vision is to deliver the Northern Line ahead of time, under budget, and retaining the reliability. If our decisions are focused on that, if we retain that big picture look, then that influences our decisions, that helps us in our day-to-day assessments, our day-to-day conversations. So retaining that big picture view whilst making the day-to-day tactical decisions. So I'm very quickly going to run you through some of the experiences we've had on Northern Line, running through the life cycle and trying to give you a picture of how our one-team approach, how our collaboration has made the project better because of that approach. So the first area to highlight is scope. We sat down about 18 months ago and had an honest assessment, an honest conversation around scope. The initial contract was let in 2003, and as Stuart's already said, Jubilee Line provided lots of opportunities for how we might do things better. And one of those was looking at the product and doing a value analysis. Was all the functionality required? Did the system perform the way we wanted it to perform? And having that open and honest conversation with Tube Lines, with the London Underground operator, enabled us to tailor the scope to make sure it was exactly what we needed for Northern Line. I think, as David said, really, the Jubilee Line wasn't an overlay solution, and one of the key drivers as we reassessed our approach for Northern Line was to move to an overlay solution, to drive the reliability or not impacting passengers. So that was key. And then there were other areas, some of the technology that wasn't actually required going forward, that we were able to take a view on and to make an assessment as to what we took onto Northern Line. But I've said that, but also we were keen to minimise change. Again, one of the key lessons from Jubilee Line was to make sure that our delivery approach aligned with our technology, with our change. So I'll try and explain that to you. On Jubilee Line, our delivery approach was based on the system being a proven system and minimal change from the baseline technology. What we ended up with was technology that had lots of testing on the railway, that had a high degree of change, and has already been explained, lots of closures, lots of use, lots of disruption, and poor reliability. So the Northern Line was based on the principle that we minimise the change from the Jubilee Line. So we bank the good work that was done on the Jubilee Line, and we make sure that we minimise change, and we make sure that our delivery approach takes the testing, as David's already said, away from the line, that all the development, that all the testing is done before we hit the mainline Northern Line. So the next key area to highlight really is around programme. And we had a number of key sessions around developing a programme. Historically, the programme had been unrealistic. It had been put together with a lack of honesty. It had been a commercial tool, and it hadn't been used to drive the programme. I think we all recognise the benefit of having an integrated programme, of identifying the key dependencies. A shared vision relies on having a shared programme and shared expectations. So we were able to sit down with London Underground, with tube lines, with contractors, with people upgrading the P-Way, and even with local communities, and understand how we best built a programme that took into account everyone's requirements, minimised the impact, and had buy-in across the board. So that's the programme that we're now embarking on. It means some challenges for Thales. One of the key challenges, as we've already said, is around not testing enclosures and testing during engineering hours. But we fully recognise that that's something that had to change. We also have this concept of an aggressive programme. So all our teams, both London Underground, Tube Lines and Thales, are driving ourselves against an aggressive programme. And a forward-leaning programme, if you like, an aggressive view of when we can commission it by. If everything goes right, we will complete the Northern Line commissioning by March 2014. And that's what we're monitoring ourselves against. That's what we're benchmarking ourselves against. We know that things go wrong. We know that you need contingency in programmes. We're not quite that silly. But what we've done is we've divorced that from the activities and divorced that from the day-to-day monitoring, so that each organisation is driving to that aggressive programme. Yes, in our back pocket we've got some contingency, because as I say, things do go wrong, we all know that. But key is each organisation working to that aggressive programme. Not one organisation and then someone else in the background thinks, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because they've got some float, but all of us focused on that programme. And so then organisation. One of the key principles of one team was to try and bring together the organisations. So for us, that means co-location. We are co-located together, so Thales as the contractor, Tube Lines as the customer, and the London Underground operational improvements team as the end user, all co-located together in Canary Wharf, all working together, understanding the problems, and as I say, driving to the one programme. And where we see taking that a step further, some of the key data, some of the key reports that drive our decisions, that drive our assessment of the project status, are now integrated reports. So we share planning teams and risk management integrated risk registers, and that allows us to use the best practice of project management wherever it sits. Whichever organisation has the best practice for risk management, then we look to use that. Whoever's best at implementing earned value, we look to use that expertise. However we best track milestone performance and productivity. So pulling together the skills and the capability from the best of each organisation. So I'm going to hand back to Stuart, who's going to talk to you about the recent contract amendment.
Okay, thanks, Andy. It is recent because it was signed just for Christmas, but it was started about a year before that. Took quite a while because we wanted to get it right. So before we signed the new contract arrangement, basically London Tube Lines paid Thales's cost on a cost reimbursable basis, and they pretty much got what it cost to deliver the job. There was not a lot of incentive to bring costs down. Why then? You might ask, would they want to change that? Because I know the reason they want to change it is because they value their reputation. They're desperate to deliver this on programme and support us. So it's a natural thing to do. So we have ended up with a new contract structure, which is an unlimited target price contract with a pain gain assessment. The way we're treating that is there is a fair assessment of costs as we go along. Too many of these NEC type contracts end up with disagreement in the early stages, and you then get into global claims, the whole thing's fall apart, and the commercial people, and if you're very unlucky, and I apologise if there's any lawyers in the room, the lawyers then take over running the job, and it just all falls apart, and delivery becomes the last thing on anyone's mind. We're not doing that. We're being fair as we go along. We've also put in place extensive training on the new contract form. So Andy and I understand it in our direct reports, but as you go out, it's a bit like a pebble in water. Not many people understand it outside of that, so we're putting extensive training in, and that's being well received. Most importantly, the one team, both Thales and Tube Lines, have said a mantra that we are going to make sure this contract ends up in gain, because that's the only way that we can make sure it is delivered earlier than programmed. So all our targets, all our discussions, all centre on being gain. It's not something we'll just stumble across by accident. It's something we're driving to achieve. The reason the contract negotiation took so long is because we had to make sure that the contract modifications were actually enabling the right sort of behaviours. I'm key, and I know Andy is, that the contract is a tool to drive the desired outcome. It's not a tool to enforce the wrong outcome. So it's absolutely critical we got that right. That's the other thing I want to talk about before Andy comes back quickly is operator involvement. It's absolutely right. David made the point that the operator really wasn't involved enough on the Jubilee line. They were kept at arm's length. They were involved in a cursory way. We've completely changed that. So we have the London Underground operator now as part of our one team. They were involved in specification. They were involved in the programme development. They will be involved in testing in Canada. They will be involved in bust-it testing as the software comes to site. They will be involved as we commission it. They will be involved all the way, which will help with their experience growth and their training. And that's the same for the Tube Lines maintainer as well, involved all the way and part of the one team. Some people may find that scary with an operator running around with a licence to talk to whoever they want to. The way we manage that is by very strict change control. So 2 years ago, you would have seen operators talking to people in Canada, conversations going on, that turning into scope creep, that turning into extra cost, delays to programme. Nothing gets through unless it goes through the joint Thales and Tube Lines Change Control Board. And we're very strict on that. And that's the way we'll enforce that.
Okay, so just briefly on a couple of the practical side of things. So in terms of installation, again, our approach here has been to use the best resources, the best capability that we have to make sure that we get the design right first time. So wherever that expertise sits, it's in all our interest to make sure that the design is right, that what the team take out on site is correct, is the most cost-effective, efficient way of implementing the product. And when we do hit problems, again, using the best expertise and the best approach for the project, regardless of who owns that problem from a project point of view or from a contract point of view, but working together to solve problems, owning each other's problems, looking for the most cost-effective, time-efficient solution. At the end of the day, it's in all our interest to deliver to the programme and to minimise costs. So governed by that behaviour dictates the way that we approach problems. I think one of the examples is around access. As you know, the Northern Line, or all of London Underground lines, there's always a challenge for access. And that the approach of the team on this has very much been about working together. And that brings benefits in terms of flexibility. So flexibility for us, where we can use other opportunities that present themselves for access, piggybacking on other closures, using other opportunities that are there. The opportunity to hand back access. Under the old regime, the old way of working, if access was booked, then it had to be used come what may, and if that meant inefficient working, then so be it. Under the new approach, working more closely with London Underground and with Tube Lines, we've actually, on the Northern Line, been able to hand back some access. So where we finished some work early, some access was cancelled, and the passengers, obviously the customers at the end of the day, benefited from additional Northern Line trains. So that working together on a weekly basis to look at how we best utilise access, how we get Talis what they need, how we also get the P-Way team what they need, how the maintainer gets what they need, all working together collaboratively allows us to keep to our programme. It doesn't mean we have to be a bit flexible, but in the global interest, it keeps all parties moving forward. Okay, testing. I think people have talked a bit about testing, and there was quite a bit of conversation about needing to test off-site and to develop emulators or simulators. Certainly one of the lessons that we learnt from the Jubilee line was the need for representative off-site testing. So be that in the software development lab, be it on a test track. One of the key principles that we've rolled onto Northern Line is the need for testing off-site and making sure that everything is robust before it hits the main railway. And then again, one of the lessons that's already been mentioned, I suppose, is around avoiding the temptation for a big bang. Stuart and David both said that on Jubilee line, we ended up commissioning 3/4 of the line over the Christmas holiday in 2010. And that was obviously driven by a lot of historic decisions. But on Northern Line, there is a real resolve and a real agreement to make sure that we commission a small area. So we've planned a small area in the north, High Barnet to West Finchley, where we initially introduced the system. We've also developed an overlay approach which allows us to grow the reliability even before we commission. And that approach then has the added benefit of allowing the operator familiarisation, so the opportunity for operators to drive in that small area. And as I've said, again, enhances the reliability and manages it within that contained area.
Last two slides. So all that talk is good, but what about progress so far? Well, I can tell you that we are ahead of programme on installation, and that's ahead of our aggressive programme. All our installation is ahead of where it should be. Our testing is broadly in line with the way it should be, and I won't go through those graphs, but they all give you a good picture. We are on programme to start testing our first section, NMA1, which will be in line with our aggressive programme. All our trains are also fitted out. So generally, in summary, we are even ahead of our aggressive programme. Now I can tell you, and Andy will agree, I'm not even going to look at him, that had we not had the one-team approach, we would have been about 3 to 6 months. I think 6 months already of our float would have been eaten up. I can recall things that happened that if we hadn't worked together, that would have been the case. So you can work that out where we would be by 2014 if we had carried on without one team. Just to reinforce, that's although the contract was signed in December, we were shadow running and emerging principle, so that's a 15-month delivery effort that we've maintained the aggressive programme over. So just in terms of summary, what's the key to success? We haven't got success yet, but I believe we're well on the way. So we've set a challenging but realistic programme, and it's absolutely crucial that doesn't become a contractual tool again for Talis and Jubilee to beat each other up with. That serves no purpose. We also need to be mindful of the stakeholders' needs, and that's anything from access to reliability to environmental issues. They're not overly contractualised in the new contractual setup, but Talis and Jubilee absolutely understand that we need to work together. It's in the bigger interests of the organisations. That's understood, it's spoken about, and it's through the culture that that's achieved. The contract needs to enable delivery. People spend too much time on writing contracts for when everything goes wrong. Well, when it all goes wrong, everyone makes up what the contract says anyway, and the lawyers decide what it says, and it's one big bum fight, and you get something out at the end which is never fair to either party. So we have focused on, yes, cover things that can go wrong, but put the effort in making sure the contract works for delivery. Involve the operator from the start, crucial. If you've got the operator along the way, not buying into what you're doing, that will generate noise, it will generate issues, you won't get cooperation, it'll be a much more difficult environment to live in. One team approach, just get everyone to do the right thing for delivery. If you've got people in your organisations, be it in the client side or the contractor side, that are not doing the right thing, all pulling in the same direction, you're not going to deliver properly. And most importantly of all, if you've got all the rest, you must get the behaviours right. If you've got breakaway groups that are not doing the right thing, behaving the right thing, you won't succeed either. So they're the keys to success. That's it, thank you.